Welcome to another video by Fabric Garage. Sorry for not making a video in a while. We've been kind of busy. But anyway, we're going to do an oil change and a transmission fluid change on my 1999 Ford Ranger. It has the 2.5 liter with the 5-speed. Now, as far as the oil change, really both the oil change and the transmission fluid change goes, it's pretty generic. This is, like I said, this is just for this particular vehicle, but you can follow these basic steps for any vehicle. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to drain the oil. Well, first thing you really want to do is check the oil just to see where it's at, and then look up how much oil it takes. So for this particular vehicle, it takes about 4.5 quarts. I'm putting just 530, just regular oil. Now it is recommended, whatever oil you choose, to constantly only use that oil, and I recommend every 3,000 miles or 3 months, whichever one comes first. A lot of newer vehicles and everything is recommending 5,000 to 6,000, but it's not that expensive to change it every 3,000, and it just prolongs the life of your motor, especially older trucks like this. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to drain the oil. It's a 15 millimeter. Most drain plugs for most vehicles are around 15 to around that size. It just depends. So we'll drain it real quick, and then we'll take the oil filter off and we'll put them back in. And I'll show you the way I put oil filters on. And then once we get done with that, we can start, or we can then do the transmission fluid change, which on this particular vehicle takes, even though it is a manual transmission with these Ford Rangers, basically, so even though it's a Ford, it's a Mazda transmission. Just Ford bought out Mazda for their transmissions because they liked their transmissions and didn't feel like making them themselves. These particular 5-speeds, pretty much from the 90s all the way up until they stopped making them, they take ATF. I'm not exactly sure why. It's just what they use. Now, if you have any Ford with a 4-speed, so basically 80s, 70s before then, those do take actual gear oil. Now for this particular, it's just Mecron. It's recommended for Mecron. I've read back and forth that you could use Mecron 5, but I just use regular Mecron, and this takes right out 4 quarts. So we'll show you the process of doing that. And yeah, so we're gonna do the oil plug first. So you can reach it from the front or the rear of the vehicle. We're just going to go through the front. Now if you take a look on your passenger side, if I get this to focus, on your passenger side, that's your drain plug. As you can tell, this is your oil pan, and that over there is your transmission. So we'll take this plug out, and then when you go to put it back in, you're going to want to make sure not to tighten it too much. You want to do snug and maybe a quarter turn. There's no need to really torque it down. You're just going to end up stripping it out. So, as you can see, we got the oil draining. And we're just going to want to make sure we don't lose any of that oil into the ground. So the best way, and the way I recommend, sometimes, as you can tell, I'm not wearing gloves. It's really good idea to wear gloves because it's not that good for your skin to get any of this oil or anything on it. But if it happens, it happens. Now the best way that I've learned to keep clean, let me get a rag real quick. The best way I've learned to keep clean, I'm gonna set y'all down, wipe off my arm. Anyway, the best way I've learned, now you can't do this on every vehicle just because some of the drain plugs are different. Come on, focus. Okay, I'm gonna grab the drain plug. What you're gonna want to do is while it's still in there, you want to keep pressing in as you're twisting it out. And you just want to keep twisting and still pressing in, even to make sure 100% that it's all the way unthreaded. And you can usually tell once you do get it unthreaded, even though you're still pushing, a little bit of oil is still going to try to come out because the plugs basically are all the way out already. What you're going to want to do is once you're sure once you're sure that you have it completely unthreaded and you're still pushing on it, you want to make sure you got enough room, and then just quickly pull your arm away real quick. And usually that's a pretty decent way of not getting oil all over your hands. I only got a little bit, and that's just from really holding the plug. Like I said, some vehicles you kind of can't do that. You still get mess on you. A lot of them you can do that. Some of the newer Fords I've seen, they have like a plastic plug where you just turn it like 90 degrees or 80 degrees and it comes out. It's kind of weird, but whatever works. But yeah, so you're just going to want to let that drain until it's done dripping, and kind of can't, oh no, you can see a little bit. It's still coming out a little bit. It's almost there. So we're going to let it drain for a little bit more. So getting your oil filter off is the next step. We'll put the plug in before we take it off just so we can keep it from dripping. So I have this kind of oil wrench. I don't know what you'd call it, but or these oil pliers or whatever. Now you can use just whatever to get them off. Sometimes if they're stuck bad enough, sometimes you have to use a screwdriver and pierce through it and twist it. That's a trick that sucks to have to use sometimes. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Now when you go to put it back on, what you're going to want to do is I do not recommend using any tools to put it back on, just so you don't, for one, damage it on the outside, but also so you don't get it too tight, because once it heat cycles, it's going to tighten up once that rubber seal swells. So what you're going to want to do is get your hands nice and clean, or a good technique is to put a rag around your oil filter once you tighten it up, and tighten it as tight as you can, only with your bare hands, no tools. If you tighten it as much as you possibly can with your hands, then that usually does the trick just good. Because if you use any tools on it, then it gets too tight, and then next time you do your change, you're going to have to either twist it in half or punch a screwdriver through it, which is never fun. So what you also want to do, now on these motors, it's on the driver's side, you can see it right there. It's kind of skinny, cylindrical. You want to take a look, make sure that they look the same, and they do look pretty similar before you take it off. Now even though, yes, I've drained the oil and it would have been a good idea to check before, you can still put the plug back in and put fresh oil in and just wait to do the filter, which would suck, but you can do that. Now there is, I'm going to put this plug back in. Now there is two ways when it comes to putting your new filter on. Let's see if I can show you what I'm doing. There is different ways about putting your oil filter on. What I do, oh come on. What I do, focus, is I just lube up the seal, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. I do not, there we go. I don't fill up my oil filter, because either way it'll end up getting filled up. Now that is only for like little trucks like this, or just regular sized trucks. So I'm just gonna do it snug, and that's tight enough. Won't go nowhere, won't get stripped, everything will be good. Alrighty. But as I was saying, so all I do when I go to put the new one on is I take some oil, and right around that seal, if it'll focus, that rubber seal that's on the outside, I just put oil on that so that when you go to spin it on, it makes good even contact, and it doesn't rub it off or make it to where it doesn't seal properly. There are a lot of people that like to fill up their filter with oil, so that it doesn't have to fill up on first start. Now for little filters like this, I generally don't, especially because you'll have some cars where it's upside down, and obviously you can't fill it up if it's upside down, so it's not too big of a deal. Now if you're doing an oil change on a diesel truck, like say a Dodge, like a 12 valve or 24 valve or 6-7, you know, where it's the filter is about the size of my hand or even bigger, and it literally takes an entire quart of oil, on those, yes, I do fill them up, because this might be like half a quart maybe, which isn't a big deal, but considering it takes an entire quart of oil, I do fill those up. But that's just me, that's just how I do it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm probably going to see if I can take the oil filter out from the top side. We'll just see. I want to line up my catch can so I don't get the oil everywhere. So that should work. It's mostly underneath it. I'm just going to take the pliers and I'm going to take it off, and then I'll just show you. Alrighty, so we got the old one out, and if you do decide to fill up your filter, you can do it. I recommend when you try to fill it up on this outside, not down this hole to filter it, because that's how it actually will filter it better. So what you want to do, I just take my finger, but anyway, I was about to say, putting it back in the box like this is a good way to hold it up, so you can have both hands on your jug or whatever you have. I'm just going to take some new oil and just put plenty around it. Make sure it's nice and lubricated so that when we twist on the seal, it seals nice and doesn't have any issues. I'm going to put this cap back on just so I don't knock it over. I'm going to take this oil filter and we're going to reach down here, and I don't know if you can see that. Probably can't. My arm's kind of in the way. Maybe you can see it there. There we go. You can kind of see. So you're just going to put it on the little stud and then just spin it. Now it should spin freely onto there, so if you have any kind of, if it's hard, then you're probably cross-threading it, which you really don't want to do. Now I've gotten it as tight as I can with just my hand. I'm going to take this rag and let this rag do the rest of the work. So I'm still doing it with just my hand, but the rag gives me that extra leverage, and extra, well, not leverage I should say, but the extra grip. I'm going to set you guys down right here for a second. I'm going to grab both hands. You can use both hands or just one hand. I just prefer just not using any tools, so just as tight as you possibly can with your hands, and that'll be plenty tight. Now I did notice, surprisingly, which is also kind of a bad thing, because if you don't get it tight enough, then it'll cause a leak, and then if you don't know it, then you can starve your engine of oil and then be just out of luck because you have no oil and lock up your motor. But when I took, which I was kind of pleasantly surprised, the oil filter and the drain plug were actually not crazy tight like they usually are, because people don't really know how to they really don't know how to do oil changes a lot of times. So I was kind of pleasantly surprised by that, but the only thing is if it is too loose, like I said, then it can back its way off. But yeah, so we're going to fill it up now. Now, when you have a jug like this, notice how I'm holding it sideways. When you hold it sideways like that, it doesn't, it gets more airflow, because you notice, I'll show you, when you pour it like this, or wait, I don't have it at the right angle. When you pour it the other way, your oil will block the hole, and it'll end up like surging, like dumping a whole bunch and then stopping and dumping a whole bunch, and it makes it hard to pour easily. If you pour it sideways like this, then it gives it a more even, like the air can actually escape through the top, so it pours a lot. So we got that drain plug out. This is what it's going to look like. It's going to be on your driver's side of the engine, so is the fill plug. Now it's a 15/16 inch socket or wrench. This is the socket I use. Now I had to, if you can tell, there's no bevels on that anymore. Normally sockets have a little bevel there to make it easier to put it on the nut. As you can see, there's barely any shoulder there, so the bevel was basically, there's only a tiny bit that was actually grabbing. So I went ahead and ground down this nut. Now I don't use it that often, it doesn't make too much of a difference. So that's what I went ahead and did to get it off. It was on there pretty tight. What you want it to be definitely on there good, but it was crazy tight. Like I had to push as hard as I possibly could. Now we're still going to want to put it on there pretty snug, but maybe not as tight as it was. Like I said, this takes just ATF fluid. I just got generic. So what you want to do is get you one of these little pumps, and you'll take the top one off once you've drained it out, and then you'll put your bottom drain plug back in, and then you're just gonna fill it up until it comes out of the fill hole, and that's pretty much it. So then you just put the fill plug back in, and then you're pretty much done. I still need to check the oil, but you just want to, when you check it, you'll just pull out the dipstick and make sure it's in between the lines. If it needs more, add more. And that's pretty much it for this video. So I'm gonna wrap this up and leave y'all here. If you liked the video, drop a like, leave a comment if there's anything I missed or anything you want to ask. If you like the channel, subscribe and hit the notification bell and check out the other videos. And I will see y'all in the next one.